On today's episode of the Cryptoverse, Mexican exchange Bitso raises $2.5 million for its expansion. Indian Bitcoin exchange Unocoin raises $1.5 million. The Lightning Network moves one step closer to reality thanks to a French company. And have we reached the end of the central bank bubble? Find out today on the Cryptoverse. TunnelBear is the simple VPN app that makes it easy to browse the web privately and enjoy a more open and secure internet experience. Try TunnelBear for free by checking out the link in the video description below. Hi there guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Cryptoverse, your regular dose of news and commentary on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies and blockchains. I'm your host, Chris Coney. So first story today comes from Bitcoin.com. Mexican exchange Bitso raises $2.5 million for its expansion. So we've got this and an Indian Bitcoin exchange raising money today. Not today, but the stories are today. So this article says that Mexico's first Bitcoin exchange called Bitso announced that it's raised $2.5 million in venture capital. The company, which was founded in 2014, has now raised a total of $4.35 million, becoming the dominant cryptocurrency provider in the Latin American region. Now it says here that Bitso was the first exchange that enabled Bitcoin for pesos trading within Mexican borders. And then it says their central order book uses the Ripple network to validate transactions. Now I find that fascinating. If you're not familiar with Ripple, I'd recommend you go to their website and watch their explainer video. They're actually creating a back-end settlement system for the banking industry and, well, for the finance industry as a whole, but they're actively seeking to provide service to existing financial institutions. And what it allows Bitso to do is access the rest of the world's mainstream financial system so that they can buy and sell Bitcoin or settle transactions. It's a settlement network, so it settles transactions worldwide. The article then goes on to talk about increased volumes and competitor acquisition. Now, competitor acquisition is investor speak for centralization, because literally competitor acquisition means there's fewer competitors. There was 3 competitors. One of them made an acquisition and basically merged 2 of the companies into one, and now there's only 2 competitors, one larger one and one smaller one, right? So it's the process of acquisition is merging and centralizing the supply of whatever the service is. An acquisition in mainstream business has a couple of benefits. One, it reduces the amount of competition, and also you can just buy a big load of customers all in one go. If you're a rival company of mine, like say an exchange, we both have 100,000 customers, I could either spend a lot of money on marketing and try and grow my business from 100,000 customers to 200,000 customers, or I could just buy your business and double the amount of customers that I've got and take out a reasonably sizable competitor in the marketplace. Now, Bitso are doing more than just providing an exchange service. It says here that Bitso also offers a merchant e-commerce platform that enables commission-free Bitcoin acceptance and a point-of-sale application. So that's going to allow merchants inside Mexico to accept Bitcoin and possibly other cryptocurrencies as payment. So this is good news for Mexico. It's good news for Bitcoin. And I like to see these stories where the actual geographic decentralization of Bitcoin is happening. So if Bitcoin has got a pretty good foothold in every major country, then it's game over, right? And that's happening bit by bit. It's not an overnight thing, but each time we put a milestone in place, we get a pretty decent exchange established in Mexico. In a minute, we'll talk about the one in India and so on. And then once they start making money, competitors will start bringing up and Bitcoin will become entrenched in those countries, and then once it becomes part of the society and part of the infrastructure, then you can't take it out after that. So let's move on to talking about Unocoin. So this is another article from Bitcoin.com, and it says Indian Bitcoin exchange Unocoin secures $1.5 million in funding. And then you've got probably a stereotypical image of a marketplace in India with your vegetables everywhere and so on. So the article starts off here by saying Bangalore, India-based Bitcoin exchange Unocoin has become the highest funded digital currency startup in India. the company has announced that it has raised $1.5 million in a pre-Series A funding round. And that's just language that venture capitals use to describe whether it's a seed round or a Series A or a Series B, etc. And the reason I find those labels useful is it kind of gives you a clue as to what stage of development the startup is in. Say, for example, if you hear of a new startup receiving a seed round of funding, that's typically when it's just a nascent idea. And the seed money literally is when the idea is a seed or the business is a seed, and the venture capitalists give them a bit of money to make sure the idea is sound and to test it out. And they're just making a small risk investment. So in case it doesn't pan out or the idea is garbage, then they don't lose a lot of money. And then once the idea proves itself in principle, you might go to a Series A round or a pre-Series A round and then a Series B and so on. And of course, each time these venture capital firms want to see the product developing to their satisfaction. So moving on with the article itself though, I've highlighted this bit because it says during the announcement, Unocoin founder and president Sunny Ray, I think that is one of the best names I've ever heard. It's like Sunny Ray. It's such a positive name. I just think that's absolutely fantastic. And that has no bearing on the article whatsoever. I just wanted you to know that that is something that I actually appreciate. And just to be clear, if you don't know what I'm talking about, his name is Sunny Ray. It sounds like he's a ray of sunshine, which to me is somewhat of an optimist. That just appeals to me. Anyway, getting back to the news then, further on in the article here, it says that Unocoin has launched an auto-selling feature for remittance users, a merchant point-of-sale app, a mobile app, and a systematic investment planning service. So again, it's not just exchanging and transacting Bitcoin for the local fiat. They're also providing merchants with point-of-sale, so they can accept, Indian merchants can accept Bitcoin and perhaps other cryptocurrencies as payment. A mobile app, that'll be huge in India, and then a systematic investment planning. So they're going to help locals with investing in cryptocurrencies, I imagine. And in this final section of the article, which is entitled Bitcoin and India's Unbanked, we've got our friend Simon Dixon, CEO of Bank to the Future, and fund manager of Bitcoin Capital. There's a quote from him here saying, in India, 95% of people do not have credit cards, and 50% are unbanked due to the country's poor financial and payments infrastructure. We believe Bitcoin has a role to play in India in the long term and are happy to join the round of the leading Bitcoin company in India. And the final bit in this article that stood out to me is this bit that says, Unocoin's new capital will help the company expand its services in India more rapidly than ever before. That's fine. But it says the company says it will succeed at bringing Bitcoin to billions as India has a significant amount of the world's computer and IT specialists. That's the humdinger for me, which is why India could be a huge boost for Bitcoin, because there's so much IT expertise in India that the talent pool for companies like Unocoin is just insane. So India could well become a world leader in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency technologies for that reason. And on top of that, as we just saw from Simon Dixon's quote, it's coupled with a huge population and a potential market. It says there that 95% of people do not have a credit card and 50% are unbanked. This is one of these situations where India is just going to leapfrog all of the what we would call modern technologies in finance, and they're just going to leapfrog it completely, much as many underdeveloped countries just completely leapfrogged the desktop computer and laptops, and the first experience of the internet that they had was on a smartphone. So they literally went from zero internet to internet on a smartphone, whereas in the West, like in the UK and Canada, America, we kind of had to go through this laborious process of having terrible 486 computers and then gradually laptops and then tablets and so on and so forth, right? With the legacy systems dragging behind, whereas countries like India are like, oh, fair enough, we'll just go straight for the latest stuff. We'll go straight to cryptocurrency, we'll go straight to smartphones and build the infrastructure based on the assumption that people are going to use smartphones, which they are. And you might think there's a benefit to being early to the party, but in this case, this is an advantage of being slightly late to the party. because a lot of the expensive innovation's been done, right? And then they can just leapfrog onto the bus and go from there. Now, while these two stories about exchanges expanding in these countries is good news, the thing that I am trying to get my head around is the fact that these are still centralized exchanges, and are therefore a centralized place that attackers and hackers can attack in order to steal large quantities of funds that are stored in one place. So they don't follow the philosophy of decentralization. It's that legacy idea of a central bank being the custodian of people's funds. Now, I'm sort of thinking out loud here. Ordinarily, what I would do is say, why don't they just establish a decentralized exchange? You may know I'm a big advocate of, say, the BitShares decentralized exchange. But the thing with that is you still have to have centralized on-ramps and off-ramps. So let me give you an example, and maybe you can help me clarify my thinking in the comments for this video. This is a shot of the BitShares decentralized exchange. And this is OpenLedger, right? This is actually OpenLedger's one of their wallets. And you can see all the different cryptocurrencies that they have here. This is inside their own wallet. So the way this works is if I want to trade some Bitcoin for something else on the BitShares network, I go to OpenLedger, which is actually a company in Europe called CCEDK. So that's a company. So I go to them and I deposit my Bitcoin with them, and they give me kind of a ticket. It's an IOU that says, yes, we have your 5 Bitcoins. Now you can go into the quote casino or into the decentralized exchange and trade with these virtual Bitcoins, basically. Then if I lose money on a trade or someone buys those Bitcoin off me, they buy the ticket off me, they buy the IOU off me, and then that other party would then go to CCEDK and take out the 5 Bitcoins that I had deposited, right? So the exchange is decentralized, but it's still not perfect, because all it means then is that CCEDK are holding the funds. And again, that's a centralized place to be attacked. So what I'm trying to reconcile in my mind right now and over the last few days is, so what is the best model? And if you can give me some insight on that, please do comment below this video and let me know. Now let's talk about the Lightning Network. We talked about Bitcoin scaling yesterday with the launch of SegWit being just on the horizon. This article from CoinDesk talks about Lightning test moves Bitcoin scaling into striking distance. So I've got a few things I want to say that stuck out to me in this article. It starts off by saying a lesser known startup has successfully tested an important piece of Bitcoin's scaling puzzle. Widely considered to be the best way to boost Bitcoin's transaction capacity, the Lightning Network proposes a way to execute the majority of transactions without involving the blockchain or compromising the network's decentralized architecture. Now that sounds like impossible on the face of it, doesn't it? And then the article says, but as a relatively new proposal, it's still very much a work in progress. That's one reason why the recent tests completed by a French company called Async have generated so much excitement. And this is Async spelt A-C-I-N-Q, Async. Inspired by a white paper released by Bitcoin mining firm Bitfury in July, the Async team launched 2,500 Amazon Web Service nodes this month as a way to test a proposed routing system for Lightning-style payments earlier this month. Conducted on the 18th of September, the test put the routing theory proposed in the white paper into practice. As it showed Lightning nodes could effectively route payments, Bitfury CEO Valery Vavilov argued that the test was a significant milestone for Bitcoin. Now, if you're like a super techie, this won't impress you, but the fact that they used Amazon Web Services to create 2,500 nodes to provide like effectively a virtual network to test their system on, like almost in a real world scenario, but in a safe environment. If you don't know, Amazon do provide like web hosting services. So when they say Amazon Web Services, they're able to sort of simulate. It's not just a simulation though. They would have been deployed 2,500 nodes, and they could have done it in various parts of the world because Amazon Web Services allows you to create instances of various hosting services you just choose the location. So you could create like a decentralized, like a second copy of the Bitcoin network that was just private for you. And then you could just go nuts doing all kinds of testing, which is better than simulation because you could actually see, in terms of geographical location and traffic through the network, whether your software actually works or not. Now, granted, it wouldn't have the same amount of volume as if you deployed it in the real world because you just couldn't generate all the chaos that exists in the real Bitcoin network, but it's a first step. Now later on in the article it says Paris-based Async has so far focused its efforts on its implementation called Eclair, driven by what Padiao says were the benefits Lightning Network could bring to the Bitcoin network when it's finally implemented by the open source community. Now, I may have pronounced that guy's name wrong. It's probably Padieu, because if he's French, his name is actually Pierre-Marie Padieu. If he was from China, I might have pronounced it Padiao, but since he's from France, we'll go with Padieu. So to be clear here, this is this async company doing their own implementation of Lightning, and they call it Eclair. And if you see on the screen in purple here, it says, named after the French word for lightning. The Eclair implementation offers to test, etc. Now, without making this episode into a technical breakdown, the bit I've highlighted in grey here, it says, put simply, each node only sees a portion of the larger network. Say there's a node sitting in a sea of nodes. It will have connections with all of its neighbors, but also with random nodes sitting further away. Now, bearing in mind this is called the Lightning Network, it's designed to allow very quick transactions to be made. And in a plain vanilla Bitcoin transaction, the transaction has to be relayed, meaning your node has to pass the transaction to its nearest neighbor, and then that node passes it to its nearest neighbor, and eventually, through a process of relaying, it gets to the whole network. The downside to that is that there is a propagation time, and the nodes furthest away from you have the greatest delay. So in Lightning, I believe they call it a channel. If you could open a channel to that faraway node, then you could just send it directly and make sure it propagates almost instantaneously. So that's what it's saying here. Instead of just having connections to your neighbors, you'd have a few connections to random nodes sitting further away. And I've just highlighted that next bit in green. It says the idea is to give the network the ability to see what's going on, not just out in front of it, but further away, even if it doesn't see absolutely everything. So again, we don't have to go into the depths of the technical analysis of this. Like I always say, you don't have to understand how the car engine works in order to be able to drive, but it's nice to have a conceptual understanding of how it works in principle. So following on from that, it says here, what we wanted to do was answer the question of, can I find a route in less than 1 second? And then Padieu reported that the test had an 80% success rate of finding a payment path in about half a second. And then under this section that says next steps, it says, quote, we think that the dynamic ranking of nodes is the next big challenge. And that was Padieu explaining that the piece that they are just about testing now is one of 2 steps for Lightning routing. The first step is static routing, where you find yourself a route to, a payment route through all the different nodes. But then the second is dynamic routing, because in the real world, there's so much chaos. You don't know whether that node's going to go offline or if it's going to be full of traffic at the time, and it needs to be reliable. And then finally here in green, it says, the Lightning Network designer, Joseph Poon, told CoinDesk that he plans to meet with the Eclair team next week so they can discuss specifications. So shifting gears now, Cointelegraph. This article was by Joseph Young, and it says, keep your bitcoins, central bankers' bubble will burst very soon. So it says, like the dot-com and housing bubbles, central bankers' bubble is presumed to break very soon. Once it does, independent currencies like Bitcoin will surge in value in high-demanding markets. Then it says in orange here that the value of Bitcoin as an independent currency relies solely on its market demand and is created at a fixed rate, which was cryptographically and mathematically set amid its launch in 2009. The US and the majority of the world's monetary systems are based on debt, as the printing of fiat money relies on the level of debt a country deals with ever increasing really. So the biggest problem with printing money is it's trying to avoid the inevitable. Like the tide comes in and the tide goes out, and we go from summer to winter and then back again. We have booms and we have busts, and you must allow both of them, because the bust is a cleansing, it's a correction, it's a natural cycle. And if it is based in nature, if it's natural, eventually nature will have its way. Meaning if central banks trying to fight the natural flow of things, like trying to hold back the tide, well, you know how that's going to go. So if you keep pumping money into the economy, blowing the bubble up and up and up and up and up, eventually nature is going to have its way and the correction is going to happen. It's inevitable. And that's why fixed issue currencies like Bitcoin, they allow for those kinds of booms and busts by the very fact that they have a fixed rate of issue. So the article goes on to say here, if and when mainstream users begin to migrate to independent monetary systems and financial networks like Bitcoin, the severely overvalued rate of cash will be exposed. Stocks and bonds will crash, putting an inevitable end to central banks. And that will be because the money that they've issued, which is, the British pound and all that says the Bank of England on it, they'll be worthless. And if not worthless, it will be significantly reduced in its purchasing power, which means fewer people will want to use it, and then that will push the value down even further, and so on and so on. And then the final section of the article here in green, it says, and this is the section on the impact on Bitcoin, it says, without the power to create more money or inflate the economy, the debt-based economy of countries will have to come to an end. Anything of value, from stocks to bonds, will be revalued, which will overhaul the world economy. Because at the moment, the vast majority of people with stocks, bonds, and so forth, and assets, they have an artificial idea about how wealthy they are. On paper, someone might be a multimillionaire based on how much their property is worth, how much all their stocks and bonds are worth, and all this kind of stuff, government gilts, whatever they own. However, that is somewhat of an illusion because all of those asset prices are massively overvalued. So when the prices of all those assets crashes, they're going to think they're like losing money, but they're not. It's just that those assets are returning to their correct market value. But to them, it will seem horrific because they've got used to this artificially high number that was false in the first place. So this article ends in blue here by saying, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin will surge to all-time highs, possibly into the, wait for it, $100,000 region, as Wall Street analysts and financial experts have stated over the years. That means we could see a $100,000 Bitcoin. Okay, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Cryptoverse. Thanks very much for watching and listening. Please go and subscribe to the Cryptoverse by going to cryptoversity.com/podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, and you can subscribe to the video version on YouTube. And please support the Cryptoverse by either sending us a Bitcoin tip directly to the address on that page, or by going to the Steemit network and clicking the upvote button for this episode. Or if you'd like to actually acquire something, you can go to the Cryptoversity store, buy yourself a t-shirt or an iPhone case with the Cryptoversity branding on it. That kind of stuff helps us out a lot. Or if you'd like more structured information on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchains, head over to the courses section and buy yourself an online course. All right, that's all for today, guys. So until tomorrow and the next episode of the Cryptoverse, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.